Hello YouTube, Flightsimguy here. I am with my CRJ-700 at Port Columbus, Ohio. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to do cold and dark startup and run through the tutorial flight, or a tutorial flight, so that you don't have to read the documentation. I'm at the foot of the runway at Port Columbus, the active runway 28 left. Because I don't want to run the risk of crashing my simulator, Shift P when you're pushing back with the pushback cart. If you have crash detection on, when you go to stop the pushback, it crashes the sim for some reason. That's a bug. They're going to have to fix that. Alright, now, what I'm going to do is, before we go into the cockpit and start things up, let me go ahead and show you the aircraft manager. That's this application right here. For this to be working, you have to have the simulator up and running, and then you go ahead and fire up the application. I don't know what it's called. It's probably called Aerosoft CRJ Manager, but because of this wonderful new version of Windows, I have to search for it. Anyway, once you're here, you can set your weight, fuel and payload weight and whatnot. You can manually add people, or you can use these presets, or you can do random. With the payload, you specify the flight information. It will go ahead and compute the fuel, and once you have everything set up here, you can go ahead and save it and it'll push to the plane. And you can also come over here and do a lot of configuration on this window also. Now this is pretty cool, but I don't use this. Why? Because Dave, the iPad in the aircraft, allow you to set fuel and payload and whatnot. So this is, I'm just showing you that you can use this. I'm going to use Dave to do the configuration. Alright, so let's go ahead and close this. I'm in screen capture mode in OBS. So let's go ahead and shut this down and resume the video in game capture mode. Alright, we're back over here. Let's go ahead and hop inside the aircraft. What's funny is moving it here was very easy. The plane put me on the runway. I would have done the video on the runway, but the runway alert and awareness system keeps saying on runway 28 left, and it keeps doing that every few minutes, even though the aircraft is off, and it keeps interrupting me. So all I did was click ready for taxi. It turned on the plane. I taxied over here, then click cold and dark, and I'm back to cold and dark. Very convenient. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the tutorial flight, and we're just going to go through the checklist. It's not really a checklist, but I'm just going to go through everything that's on here. First thing we need to do, let's set our options and our payload information and fuel. So what we're going to do is go home. We go to options. We want pounds, inches of mercury, Celsius. This is all good. Save. Go home, and then we want payload and fuel. Looking at my flight plan, I'm taking 50 passengers, and I remember from the last time I tried this what happened. 0 cargo, and fuel is about 8,200 pounds. We'll just leave it at 86, round it off with a nice round figure. Set fuel and payload. Save. Next thing we need to do is do our safety checks. Nose wheel steering needs to be off. Hydraulics needs to be off. These are all in the middle. They're all off. Next, airspeed. This is your spoiler. Should be down. Back that way. Flaps all the way up. Gear down. These buttons you use to align the INS, these should be off. And you want to check to make sure that this and this is the air dynamo generator. It's the ram air turbine. If you lose hydraulic and or electrical power in flight, you go ahead and drop this, and it will put out a propeller that turns a generator that gives you just enough power to manage the systems. Here's your parking brake. I want to set that. This is the manual landing gear extension. In case this doesn't work, you use this to pull the gear down, and in case your flap switch doesn't work, you use flaps down here to lower your flaps. Make sure that's set. Weather radar needs to be off. Papers, documents, whatnot, all that is not simulated. Alright, next, what we need to do is get some juice to the plane. Go ahead and bring up the overhead panel, view, change view, 2D panel. And what we want to do is we want to turn on the battery master and then turn on the APU. You can use Dave, the iPad, to call up a GPU card and get power from that. But since we're out here, we're not going to use the GPU card. So the first thing we want to do is turn your battery master on. Leave this off. Turn on the fuel boost pumps so that we can get fuel for the APU. Okay. Press the APU start, and then down here you can confirm that the APU is spooling up. Once the APU is fully started, you will know because it makes a lot of noise. Bleed valves should be set to auto. Bleed source, the engines aren't running, so turn this to APU. Next, shift 1 gets you back to the pilot's view. Turn off these master warnings and master caution. Next, you want to turn on these so your INS can start aligning. Emergency equipment. Here you can come over here and normally what you do is you check your air and your oxygen and whatnot. It's not simulated here. Airline documents not simulated. Next item is to program the flight management computer. Before we do that, let's get an ATIS report. This is the FMS right here. For some reason, you can't resize it. Okay? For what we're going to do next, you can manually use your mouse to click on these buttons, but they've made it in such a way that you can configure it so that your keyboard can input information on the CDU. Control Shift 1 activates the left. Control Shift 2 activates the right. After you've hit Control Shift 1, it binds the keyboard to the CDU, and when you're done, you need to hit Control Shift 1 again to turn it off. So it toggles it on and off. Alright, so Control Shift 1, it is now on. F1 through F6 represents line select key left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then F7 through F12 represents line select key right, 1 through 6. A through Z on the keyboard represents A through Z here, and then the number keys represent the number keys. These are the buttons you have to click them manually. So we hit F2, position init, KCMH. This is awesome. It makes things go by a lot faster. And then F11. Let's see. Nope, that's right. We want F8. And then F11. And then F12. This is absolutely fantastic. 1, F7, and then I pull up the flight plan. First waypoint is Rosewood, ROD, F10, and then we go to the next page. Next waypoint is Fort Wayne, FWA, and that's going to be 789. And then we are coming in on the Watson 3. So at this point what I do is I go to departure arrival. I want arrival, and then I go down to Watson 3, and I'm going to use the FWA transition. and execute. Okay, go to the flight plan. Next page. Alright, so I kind of goofed up. What it did was it put FW in here twice, which is fine. Now let's go ahead and wrap up the flight plan. Let me see if I can put KORD here. And then go to F11. There we go. And then hit execute. Alright, to get rid of that extra FWA waypoint, we go to legs. Here's one right here. Hit delete. Execute. Alright. Go back to the flight plan. Then we go to perf and net. And for the weight and balance, what you can do is come over to Dave. Fuel and payload. Set copy data to perf and net. Copies it over. And enter our cruise altitude, which is going to be flight level 320. So I just enter FL 320. 20 cruising altitude, and then we hit execute, and then we go back to index, flight plan, perf and net. It doesn't compute a vertical profile for you. You have to fly that manually. Also, this aircraft does not have an auto throttle. You have to do that manually. Let's see if there is any information for takeoff. Next page. Next page. Alright, we're good. And that's it for the flight management computer. We don't need to be hearing any chatter on the radio. Swap it over. Next, we need to turn on our passenger signs. Set these to auto. Emergency lights need to be armed. Next item to test is the audio warning panel, which is on the co-pilot side. Right here. You'd have to be on the co-pilot side to test it. That checks that both push buttons are safeguarded and no lights are illuminated. Next, you need to check your overhead panel, the electrical components. DC service needs to be on. IDG disk switches, these needs to be dark, cold, and guarded. Your battery master is on, and your generators are set to auto. This here tests the fire detection and extinguish fire detection test. You click it in and hold it for 2 seconds, and then on the CDU it says fire system OK. Next, we need to do our lights. Set your nav lights on and your logo lights on. The remaining lights should be off. Landing lights off. Taxi lights off. Next, we need to check our fuel. At this point, we don't need these fuel pumps running. You can turn that off. Bleed air needs to be at normal. Bleed valve set to auto. Bleed source remains APU. Before we start our engines, let's go ahead and set up the guidance panel with the information that we've gotten from ATIS. We're taking off from runway 28. So let's go ahead and set the heading to 280, which is right about here. Let's double check that. That's right. We'll set our altitude to flight level 320. Turn these off. Next, set your speed bug to 250. This next test you can do if you'd like. In the simulator it probably serves no purpose. What you want to do is test and confirm your hydraulics. So set your hydraulics to auto. Come down here, select hydraulics from this set of buttons, and you'll notice that the hydraulic system is not pressurized. 0 psi. And here you can do a fluid check. Normal hydraulic fluid quantity is 45 to 85%. We're at 62. Next, we want to turn on pumps 1, 3B, and 2. 1, and set it to on. 3B, and 2. And now you can see the system is pressurized. And you can confirm your flight control surfaces by hitting flight control. And while turning the yoke, look at this. And this confirms that everything works the way it should. And then you can do the rudder. I'll go ahead and turn this one on also. Alright. This one I'm going to set to auto. This one I'll leave on. This I set to auto. Okay, this one is electrically driven. The others are hydraulic or engine driven. And I'll turn off the electrically driven one once. That's the backup once we're in flight. Next, we need to turn on the ELT transmitter. We want to set it to arm. What this does is if a plane crashes, a beacon goes off so that people can find it. Next item is cabin pressurization, which is up here. This is largely automatic. If you want, what you can do is go ahead and bring up the overhead panel. While looking at this view, bring up the overhead panel, view as a new view. Make it a bit bigger. And you can set the cabin or the landing elevation, because right now we're at Columbus and we're at 800 feet above the ground or above sea level. Set landing elevation to 800. And you do the same when you're landing. Okay, and then we can close this window. Cabin pressurization is largely automatic, so you can just go ahead and leave it the way it is. We should have had the air conditioner turned on and the recirc fan on, otherwise your passengers would be complaining about how hot and stuffy it is back there. So that's the air conditioning system. Your anti-ice, you want to leave these off for when you're taking off. The de-icing systems draw bleed air from the engines and it reduces the engine's power because it's taking hot air from there, and so you want to leave this off when you're on the ground. If you have icing on the ground, the de-icing trucks with the de-icing fluids will take care of that. Once you're in the air and you're at a stable altitude, then you can go and turn on the anti-ice. And these are your window anti-icing systems. Let's go ahead and turn these on. These are your probes, so your pitot heating systems. Turn those on. And I like having the extra light to turn on the dome light right here. This is the ram air turbine switch. I missed this earlier. This turns on the ram air turbine if you have electrical or hydraulic failure. Alright, next what we're going to do is we're going to do a stall test of the pusher system. Stall PCT pusher. That needs to be set to on. And then left click to open this and hold down the stall button. and it goes through the test sequence. You have to hold it in. Okay. Alright. Next. Your nose wheel steering needs to be set to off prior to pushback. To prevent damage to the nose wheel steering mechanism during pushback, you want to set it to off. And here you also set your clocks. Now we're at the runway, so I'm going to turn on the nose wheel steering. Next, you need to set up your EFIS. Normally, there you go. You click on this, it removes the yoke. EFIS, this right here controls the range on the outside. No, the outside controls the format, and it goes from this to this to this to this to that, and you can select the one you need accordingly. In my case, I'm going to need that. And this on the inside selects the range. This is, if you look right here, it says the number. I can go ahead and click on it, pop it out. This one I can resize. 40, 20, 10, 5, and it goes all the way up to 640. Pretty impressive. Okay, let's go ahead and set this to there. And if I zoom out far enough, I can see I'm flying to Chicago. Alright, let's get this back. Oops, wrong one. 40 is what I normally have it set to. Close that back. This is a nav source. You want this to say FMS1. And what that means is when you turn on the autopilot and engage nav, it will take commands from the flight management computer. While we're here, let's set our altimeter. We're at 3011. Here you can switch between millibars and inches of mercury, 3011. And this button here switches things around, whatever floats your boat. And I like to have that over there. Decision height, minimum. This right here is your cockpit voice recorder. Click and hold for 5 seconds. It tests, and it should light up. There it goes. That's good. Bring my yoke back. Here you have your flap speeds. Over here you want to make sure your anti-skid is armed. These two switches simulate overheat condition in the main landing gear bay. Gear bay overheat. Okay. This is your engine sync. Just leave it at N1. That's for noise abatement. This is your lamp test. When you click that, every single lamp lights up to make sure you don't have any bad bulbs. And here you can make it bright or dim. These are your ground proximity switches. Ensures that terrain and flap switches are guarded and no lights are on. So let's make sure that these are guarded and dark. Next, you want to make sure that your thrust reversers are armed in case you have to do abort takeoff. Next, let's go ahead and set our squawk. We'll go ahead and squawk 2200. Here you can also set up your TCAS. We want it to be automatic. Traffic on. Let's come back. Sorry, return. And here you can toggle between COM1 and COM2, NAV1 and NAV2. Here are your switchover switches. If your standby frequency and your active, the active is the one that's lit or green. The white is the one that's standby. You just come here and then you can change. The outer knob does the digits to the left of the decimal. The inner knob does the digits to the right. And it works on all of them. Air ADF, TCAS, ATC. We are on standby. We'll start squawking just before we take off. Yaw damper. Switch them on. Just hold it down. And you know it works because then the yaw damper button goes off, or the light goes off. And then same with the stabilizer trim and the Mach trim. Mach trim, stabilizer trim are here. So what you do is you come down here and hold it in for a couple seconds. There we go. And those messages, they went away. Next up, the source select panel. Make sure everything is set to norm. And as I discussed before, make sure that these are in order. Parking brake is set. Manual landing gear extension is fully stowed, and ditto for the ram air turbine. And your emergency flaps are up. Alright. Now we're ready to start. Starting the aircraft is very straightforward. All you need to do, turn off the air conditioning, bleed air set to APU, turn on your pumps, and then hit start. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to do engine number 2 first. Hit start, and then you come on down here and you watch while the engine spool up. When N2 hits about 18, you click this up and move that forward, and then engine 2 lights off. Wait for engine 2 to stabilize and repeat the process for engine 1. Engine 1, wait until N2 gets about 18 to 20. Click the red knob, bring it up, then bring that up until it hits go to idle. And at this point you want to work to clear off any lights. Okay, we have engine 1 and engine 2 going, so now we're going to switch bleed source to both engines. We're going to turn off the APU, and we're going to turn on our air conditioning. Okay, we want the thrust reversers to be armed for takeoff. Alright, seat belts. I thought I had that set. Yes. Alright. Parking brakes on, no smoking. Next, we need to get ready for takeoff. We're right here, so we'll just go through the motions. 2 notches of flaps. We'll start squawking. Turn your transponder on. After we set the transponder, what we need to do next is a trim. Set it to about 7. That should be good. And at this point, if you want, you can use Dave to go through your checklists. You have your safety check, originating check, you have your before start check, and at this point we are at before takeoff. So let's go ahead and call. Oh, alright, now my keyboard is still bound to CDU1. I forgot to unbind it, so I need to hit Control Shift 1, and then I can get my keyboard back. There we go. And let's go ahead and get our taxi. We are going to the north. Alright. We'll leave that window up. And all I'm going to do now, come off the brakes, and just roll the plane up to the whole short line.
Approaching 28 left.
Okay, let's turn on the runway lights. Turn on all remaining lights. We are good to go. There's a plane coming in. Yeah, there's a plane all the way out there. He's coming in. So we need to do a rolling start. Get my speeds off to... Oh crap, I didn't do my speeds. V speeds. Set, 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 set.
On runway 28 left.
Alright, let's get going. Max.
Config spoilers.
Oh, spoilers are out.
Config spoilers.
I must have accidentally touched the button. Alright, use the rudder to maintain runway center line. V speeds were copied over at the last minute. V1, rotate. V2, positive rate, gear up. Okay. Flaps up. Let's go ahead and turn to get on course. Alright, this has a FADEX system, so all I need to do is put the nose down, trim down a bit. Let's get on course. Let's arm a few items here. Okay. We're going to bring the throttle back to climb. Right there. Lower the nose. Maintain speed. Autopilot engage. Altitude, vertical speed. And we're going to keep the nose at about, that's too high. Let's put it at about 1.5. And the plane at this point should turn to maintain the flight path. And it is turning. I have the vertical speed profile set up. It's going up at 1700 feet per minute. The engines on this aircraft, I do want to say the aircraft is underpowered, but it is not as the ratio of the engine weight to the aircraft weight to the engine power is it's a little bit off, and it doesn't climb as quickly as say the ERJ. Feel there is ERJ. All right, so we're in a good climb. We're busting the speed limit, unfortunately. So what I can do is bring this back. Oops. Set the speed to 250 and hit speed. And I think what that does is it's going to put the nose up to get the speed to what I set it to, which needs to be 250. And what that means is it's going to increase the vertical profile or the vertical climb. There. Alright, I can go ahead and turn these off. And there's still that APU thing open. That's the bleeder source. These fuel pumps, I'm guessing I could turn these off. The on is for the electrical fuel pumps. The off, if I leave them off, they'll be using the engine driven pumps. So I don't see any reason why I can just turn those off. Alright, we're perfectly on course and our speed is in order. Past 10,000 feet, I can go ahead and turn off the landing lights. And it looks like we're in the soup. Now, a measure of any good add-on aircraft is how well it performs in warp. Warp is my phrase or terminology for upping the simulation rate. I mean, the best parts of flying is all the stuff on the ground and your takeoff and your approach and landing. So once you're at cruise and you're not going to do anything, and you don't want to waste time sitting there while it's cruising, just go ahead and up the simulation rate. I've done it with this aircraft. It works just fine. Unlike the Captain Sim 757 and 767 that freaks out when you up the simulation rate to times 8, this one handles it beautifully. In this case, I'm going to Chicago, which I didn't enter in my flight actually, did I? Let me double check. Legs. Next. Yes, chord is there. So if I go to my Prague, I have 216 miles on my trip, which is right. With that, I'm just going to go ahead and let this bad boy cruise. Once I get up to flight level 320, I can bring it back from climb to a lower engine setting. And then we'll handle the approach and land. Alright, we got the ATIS. 3003. Let's go ahead and set the altimeter. Every runway is probably in use, so get rid of that. Approach hold is on. Should be intercepting the ILS shortly. Still at idle. We'll let the speed lead off some more. Next altitude is Sibley, which is 2,200 feet. Let's go ahead and dial it in just to be safe. As you can see, I cut out the bulk of the cruise portion of the flight. Reason being, there's not much to show. Once the nav hold is engaged and it starts to the flight management computer, the plane pretty much flies itself, and it does a very good job of it. Managing the vertical profile, you have to do that yourself. It's just a matter of stepping through the various altitudes per your flight plan in SimBrief. Now, about the flight management computer, I did not spend a lot of time reading about the documentation on that. There is two things that I need to confirm. Number one, once you've programmed the flight management computer, you need to verify your route. So far, what I've been doing is zooming out to make sure that all my waypoints are in the same area. There's got to be a way where I can step through each individual waypoint to make sure there are no gaps between any waypoints and that everything is contiguous. There's got to be a way to do it. I just need to figure that out. Also, on the flight plan page in the flight management computer, it has areas for your speed and your altitude for each waypoint. It doesn't compute the vertical profile. I'm guessing you can manually enter that. I just haven't taken the time to try that out. My Chicago scenery, I don't recall the vendor I brought it from, but it hit my frames pretty bad. I was barely out of the single digits. Otherwise, it looks pretty good. And a final observation, I'm lined up with the runway here, but just before I turned off the autopilot, and you'll notice this, the jet was a little bit off center. It showed being perfectly lined up in the ILS as far as the equipment goes, but physically speaking, the airplane was a little bit off to the right. So I had to turn off the autopilot, come to the left a little bit, and put it down, and as a result, my landing was a little bit off center. The iPad computes your speeds for you. You just need to remember to set the speeds in the plane using the iPad. Go to your V speeds, set your landing speed so that it actually shows up on the tape so you know what range to keep the speed in. Alright, that's enough talk for now. Let's go ahead and check out the landing.
Tower, Pacific 90263 at runway 10, ready for takeoff. IFR to us. Pacific 90263, cleared for takeoff. Runway 10. Cleared for takeoff. Runway 10, Pacific 90263.
500. 400. 300.
Caution, taxiway. Caution, taxiway.
200. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
As you can see, that was not one of my better landings. This is like the third or fourth flight I've done with this aircraft. All the previous ones, the landing, the approach and landing was done manually. I actually hand flew it in. In this case, I used the autopilot for the approach and final approach, and as you can see, it wasn't that good. So I think I'll stick to manual landings for now. I left in some of the footage from the taxi, and this was a taxi from hell, because 27 right was all the way out in BFE, so I had to taxi a good 15-20 minutes to get to where the gates are. And this was just to check out the scenery. It looks pretty good, but like I said, it really beat up on your frames. Maybe I should double check the Chicago scenery to see if they have a light version I can install. Maybe I need to tone down the graphics. Either way, it beat up on the scenery pretty bad. Pulling into the gate, the jetway works with the Control J. I'm not sure if there's a way I can operate the jetway, you know, with keys or whatnot. I tried to automatically find the door, and it wound up just sticking itself to a random part of the plane. That aside, it was a relatively decent flight. This plane, it has a couple bugs that needs to be worked out. I don't think none of the bugs are showstoppers. The plane is perfectly flyable, and it's easy to fly. It's easy to get in there, set up, and go. And that's good. I really like that. So I think Aerosoft and Digital Aviation definitely have a winner. I suspect this aircraft will move to the top of the best-selling list on FS Pilot Shop for a couple of weeks, maybe Sim Market, and we're gonna be seeing a lot more videos out there on this. So I really enjoy this plane. 2 thumbs up. Anyway, I think that's it for now. We wrap up this voiceover and kick off the rendering. Rendering this thing in 1080p, 60 frames per second takes forever. That said, my name is Flightsimguy. Thank you very much for watching this video. I will see you next time.